Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. In this video, I want to share with you the story of Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell. And these are autographed. I really specifically wanted two cards that I thought were historically significant to the hobby. And I picked the 1980 Topps. It's actually the last year for Topps as a monopoly, and I didn't have any of these cards. Surprisingly, my collection from the 1980s was destroyed by water damage. So uh, I kind of like made the switch from modern in the 1980s and early 90s to vintage in 1994. So I really didn't have a whole lot of modern cards that I grew up with. So I chose this card specifically because it is the last year for Topps as a monopoly, and I wanted a card of Lou Whitaker autographed. And his autograph is changed a little bit. Sometimes he will write out his full name, and sometimes he won't. And this doesn't have his full name, but it says it's obviously Lou Whitaker. The Whitaker part in his name is a little bit hard to read, and it's I don't want to say it's sloppy, but maybe I don't know. I don't know what he thinks when he's signing his autograph, and I don't want to insult him in any way. Some of the modern players today of absolute garbage autographs, and I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. And so his autograph, in comparison to a lot of the most of the modern players today, is like a 10. Okay, it's just these guys don't know how to sign their names, and it's really a disservice to the collectors. And then Alan Trammell here is another guy that I wanted to get autographed as well, and specifically on this card, a 1981 Donruss, because it is the first year that Donruss was able to enter into the hobby, specifically the sports card hobby. And so it is another significantly historic set. And I really like the design as on these as well. So I'll show you the back. It looks like that. Really cool, really neat design. But these guys have a really fascinating story, and I wanted to tell you about it today. I do have an article that I'm going to read to you. I think Alan Trammell is going to make a very interesting case for his friend and teammate. Really, these guys are like peanut butter and jelly of baseball. And Alan Trammell did get in the Hall of Fame, and Lou Whitaker hasn't. And this kind of bothers me because their careers kind of mirror each other. Their stats do it anyway. They both had virtually 20-year careers, and I did get to see both of these guys play quite a bit when they came into town and played against the Red Sox. And I also got to follow these guys through the Dead Tree Media newspapers and Beckett. So I really enjoyed watching these guys play. I think Lou Whitaker was probably one of my favorites, as well as Hojo. That'd be Howard Johnson, and I do have rookie cards of these guys too. So the first rookie card is, well, it's the mainstream rookie, if you will, and this has Paul Molitor and Alan Trammell on it. And this was a very popular card when I was growing up. And at the time, say in October of 1991, this card was actually quite expensive. It was going for about $55, probably a little bit over that in reality. But I couldn't pick it up. It was just too expensive. So today, you can get this card for about $20 or under. And I think I paid like $16. Not bad, but for me, this is actually my memory, so I didn't really care. It's just the older that I get, the more I start to think back about what my childhood was like. I had a pretty good childhood. It was tough. It was tough growing up. Uh, Specifically because I had a really bad education and I'm disabled. But other than that, the 1980s were a really fun time. It was a great time to be a kid. The movies, the music, the sports cards, it was all great. Um, and so there's another rookie here that I want to show you guys. And one thing is that Lou Whitaker is also uh, in this. Basically, he's also in this set in the same format. I don't have that card, and Jack Morris as well. He also has a card very much like that, but I don't have that either. It's kind of funny. I just picked up a bunch of cards from the early 80s because I never had them growing up. And again, I don't have my original collection from the 80s. It was destroyed by water damage. And so when I was collecting cards in the 1980s, it was modern, and I only switched over to vintage in 1994 when I was a teenager. And so I never left the hobby. I have forgotten, or I didn't pay attention or didn't follow modern cards after 1994, which now I'm kind of I'm not making up for it because I really don't want to go down that road. But there are a few ball players I do want cards of after 1994. But I don't know if I'm gonna actually grab any. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, the other rookie card is Lou Whitaker, and this is a 1978 Topps Burger King. It was a regional issue specific to Detroit and Michigan, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about Burger King itself and why Burger King actually issued these particular cards. Now, Burger King also issued New York Yankees, I believe, in like 1981. But you guys can correct me there. I'm just kind of guessing. In 1981, I think the Yankees went to the World Series. I think it's been a long time. I do remember 1981 vaguely. I remember Reagan getting shot. But what's really interesting about this set and why collectors really kind of gravitate toward it is because while these guys are in the regular 1978 set, which I just showed you here, the photos are much different. And Jack Morris and Alan Trammell both have rookies in this set. So looking at this particular card here, and it doesn't have anything that says on it that it's from Burger King, but we definitely know it is because we have unopened packs. So the one thing that this really kind of reminds me of too is that even in the 1950s, companies were going to Topps and asking them or signing contracts with Topps to have cards printed for their specific company. And the first one I can remember of or think of is the Hires Root Beer set from 1958. And that set, I've discussed that a little bit here, and I don't have any of those cards, but they contracted out to Topps to have their cards printed, and the design is actually from Bowman. So when Bowman sold the company in February of 1956, Topps acquired their designs for the upcoming year in 1956. Obviously, one of those designs was implemented for the 1957 Topps football set, and another one was for the 1958 Hires Root Beer set. And so I thought that was actually really interesting that they kept a lot of those designs. And what Topps used to do actually was they would design like 5 or 6 different types of cards, and they'd put them in a binder, and then they'd go off to like say Chicago or Pittsburgh or Los Angeles, and they would interview kids to see what their favorite design was. And then once they went to all those cities, probably a dozen cities or so, they'd fly back to New York and then they'd see what the results were from the kids. If they liked the card, then it would be printed. If they didn't, obviously, right? So that's actually one of the reasons why we have the designs that we have from like the 1950s and 1960s, because they polled all these kids to see what their favorite design was, and then tally it up at the end, and then that's what you get. So one of my favorite designs from the 1970s is the 1977 tops. And as you can see here, this is not a baseball card or football card. This is a soccer card from A, B, and C Gum. And you can see the design is exactly like the design of 1977 Topps football. And I really love the design. It's obviously Liverpool. Emlyn Hughes here is a Hall of Famer. Soccer, obviously, or football. But the back is a lot different. So Topps used to contract out to other companies. Obviously, you can see here, and then they'd also print cards from, say, I believe it was North Ireland. They had a printer out there, and they'd print a lot of cards. And I think a lot of those cards came back to the United States. These particular cards didn't. But they'd also set up deals in Venezuela as well. And actually, the first deal that they did in Venezuela was 1957. And then, they had baseball cards. I don't have any of those. Those are very, very popular in the hobby. So today, I thought what I'd do is kind of share with you a little bit about Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker through an article that I found. And I think, again, Alan Trammell makes a really good case, I think, for Lou Whitaker to get in the Hall of Fame. One thing that I think I have some problems with the Hall of Fame, not just Cooperstown, but Canton specifically. And I'm going to tell you a little bit why I have these problems at the end. So here we go. This is from the Detroit Free Press, December 1st, 2019. USA Today Sports. Who knew that USA Today actually had a sports section? Anyway, Lou's Clues, Whitaker's Hall of Fame case never far from Trammell's mind, by Anthony French. When Alan Trammell hopped on a plane from San Diego to the 2017 winter meetings in Orlando, he wasn't thinking about being elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Trammell was one of 10 players on the first ever modern era committee ballot, along with former Tigers teammate Jack Morris. But he didn't bring any nice clothes because he didn't think he'd be elected. Honestly, I really wasn't, Trammell said. I didn't think mine was going to happen, and people might think, oh, you know what? But I'm being honest. But as the committee's second vote approaches this month, Trammell has noticed himself thinking more and more about it, thanks to a familiar name on this year's ballot, Lou Whitaker, Trammell's middle infield partner for nearly 20 seasons. I'm thinking a lot more about Lou than I ever did for me, Trammell said. He's starting to get more love, and people, for whatever reason, years ago, he got overlooked. It can't be a moot point, and hopefully we're going to be talking and smiling and writing the same kind of stuff that Jack Morris and I got a couple of years ago, and he gets to be inducted. Whitaker, 62, is one of 10 people who are up for election on December 8th. The committee is tasked with re-examining the Hall of Fame cases of candidates from the 1970 to 1987 era who were passed over on the Baseball Writers Association of America ballot. Whitaker has a good case as anybody on the ballot. In 19 seasons, the five-time American League All-Star second baseman hit .276 with 244 home runs, 1,084 RBI, and 143 stolen bases. Whitaker was the 1978 American League Rookie of the Year, a four-time American League Silver Slugger, and three-time American League Gold Glove winner. His stay on the BBWAA ballot lasted all of one season. He received 2.9% of the vote in 2001, well below the 5% needed to stay on the ballot. That's considered one of the biggest Cooperstown snubs in recent memory. He wasn't, to a lot of people, especially to the media and to the outside, he kept a lot of things in, Trammell said. He didn't go out and say a lot of things. He did his talking just by his play. But obviously, we knew him a lot better because in a clubhouse environment, we're with each other. He was very confident in himself as a player, as you have to be. You can't go around thinking, I don't think I can play. He knew he could play, but he didn't go out there saying it outwardly. That just wasn't his style. He was taught, just like I was, and Gibby and Lance Parrish and Jack and Dan Petrie and all of the rest of the guys that came up with our core. He was taught exactly the same, and he was with me every step of the way. Whitaker's election to Cooperstown is personal for Trammell, who was inducted into the Hall in 2018 along with Morris. Whitaker was mentioned prominently in Trammell's speech at the induction ceremony. My whole career, I had been linked with one person for 19 years. Lou Whitaker and I formed the longest-running double-play combination in the history of baseball. I doubt that record will ever be broken. Lou and I were called up to the big leagues from Double-A on the same day. We both played our first big league game at Fenway Park on the same day. We both got hits at our first major league at-bats off the same pitcher, Reggie Cleveland, and both got our last hits of our careers off the same pitcher, Mike Fetters. Can you believe that? That's truly amazing. For all those years, it was Lou and Tram. Lou, it was an honor and a pleasure to have played alongside you all those years, and my hope is that someday you'll be up here as well. Trammell, an avid baseball historian, knows where Whitaker stacks up among the rest of second basemen in Major League history and can put a modern era perspective on how good Whitaker was for all those seasons. The game was a little different then, as far as it was just numbers and WAR and all that stuff, he said, but WAR wins above replacement. Lou's WAR is outstanding, but WAR wasn't even a statistic when we were playing. I laugh when I hear it because it's like we're just playing baseball. It wasn't a category. It wasn't even in existence. But when you look back and go, hey, Lou Whitaker's WAR is pretty darn good according to all the guys in the history of the game. So that's where I think the love and the momentum seems to be coming from. Whitaker amassed 75.1 career WAR, according to Baseball Reference, which ranks 78th in baseball history. Only 9 of the players ahead of him on that list are not in the Hall of Fame, and 7 of those are either not eligible for induction or implicated in PED use. Trammell endorsed Whitaker's skills as a hitter. He was always, to me, a much further advanced hitter than I always was, Trammell said. His eye, the one difference, I was always amazed at his ability to take close pitches. We were taught you don't want to get rung up on a strike three. That was kind of the mentality of that era, but he had the ability to take pitches, close pitches, that I know in my mind I couldn't take, and I didn't take, and I'd swing or foul a ball off or do something with where Lou always had the ability to take those pitches, and I was always amazed by that. The duo had a defensive connection as well, building a reputation as perhaps the best double play duo in history, or at least the most productive. Years of practice gave them the ability to throw to where the other one would be arriving rather than where they were. Though there aren't any Haddon fast numbers, it's estimated that the duo turned at least 1,300 double plays. It's a reputation that would be cemented in Cooperstown if Whitaker is chosen by 75% of the 16-member committee, which is made up of former execs and players. Last year, the Today's Game Committee, 1988 to present, with similar makeup, selected Harold Baines and Lee Smith for induction. I do think that format has been helpful, Trammell said. I know it has helped for Jack Morris, and I am hopeful, and it's hopeful for Lou as well. I don't know who is on the committee, but I did know, like it was for us, the group that selected Harold and Lee Smith, former players, peers from our era, who understood the game as a little different than it is now. Until the vote through the Hall of Fame will be on Trammell's mind, much more than it was 2 years ago. He hopes his double play partner can receive the same honor that he did, an honor that Trammell wants more for Whitaker than he ever did for himself. I'm hoping, he said, I'm hoping. So as we see that Dave Parker and Richie Allen, or Dick Allen, they got in the Hall of Fame after years and years of really kind of like twisting in the wind. And again, a lot of people say that the ballot for these specific committees are rotations of the same players year after year, and if that's the case, then obviously some of those guys are going to get in the Hall of Fame because you're not really adding other players, and the guys who are actually on those era ballots, some of them actually do deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But if you only have a committee, a select committee to research these guys, and if it's all made up of former players and executives, and maybe a historian or two, I'm not entirely sure. There could be some bias there. Obviously, being human means being biased in some form or fashion, so you're not really going to get rid of that. But I actually would like to see a committee made up of strictly members of, say, SABR. Now, I am, again, biased about that, too, because I am a member of SABR, and those guys and girls at SABR are some of the best researchers and writers that I have ever seen. They by far blow away the majority of writers that you find in, say, your regular newspaper, because they have more access, I think, to research. Maybe not access specifically to the ball player, but in this case, I've always kind of come to the conclusion that if you're a writer from Boston, how can you actually vote yes or no for a player who's up for election or who's played in a different city, specifically one that you've never seen, right? So, say Barry Larkin, I don't see that a writer from Boston would be able to vote for or against Barry Larkin because they've never seen him play. And that's changed a little bit now because of interleague play. But with these two guys who just got in, a lot of people say that we're now getting into the Hall of the Very Good. Well, I don't think we're now getting into it. I think that's been happening for 80 years, in fact. There are certain players we do definitely know who've gotten into the Hall of Fame because they were friends of Frankie Frisch. And Frankie Frisch kind of like swayed or probably threatened, who knows, the Veterans Committee to get these guys elected who really would have no business otherwise of being or getting into the Hall of Fame. Guys like Chick Haffey, specifically him, because if you look at his record, it's pretty dismal. George High Pockets Kelly is another one. And I think there's about 7 of these guys that are directly contributed to Frankie Frisch getting him into the Hall of Fame. And he wasn't alone either. He had Bill Terry and Fred Lieb, who is a sports writer, who kind of swayed some of these guys. Again, we never saw these guys play either, so it's kind of difficult for a guy like me in 2024 saying that these guys are really they're not deserving of Hall of Fame consideration. I've never seen them play. Contrary to what I look like, I have not seen these guys play. But there's 2 things that they look at when trying to get players into the Hall of Fame. One is the statistics, and 2 is how these guys stack up among their peers and what they did for their teams and for baseball in general. And I think you can make a case for Buck O'Neil being not the greatest ball player in the world in the Negro Leagues, but I think he's really in there for what he did for baseball. And there is no real contributor section to baseball. I'd say Buck O'Neil is maybe the first true contributor to the game, if you will, and not just what he was doing on the field, because there were a lot better ball players. And that's not a knockdown of Buck O'Neil. I love Buck. He was a great guy, and he's probably in some Hall of Fame somewhere, the Hall of the Awesome Human Being. That's where he is too. So just because, for Buck personally, for me, I was very upset when he didn't get in the first time. He should have gotten in when he was alive, and that really kind of again hit home for me, watching these 2 other guys get in, Dave Parker and Richie Allen, or Dick Allen. I think he preferred Dick Allen. Anyway, so Dick Allen, he passed away in 2020, so he was not able to enjoy a traditional induction. So we also don't get to hear his induction speech either, which I think is a travesty, if you will. I think a lot of people have said that he's was a very troubled person off the field, but he treated his teammates very well. He just didn't like the management either, and there's a lot there to study with him. And then Dave Parker also has some issues as well, specifically his drug use and the Pittsburgh drug trials of 1984-85 and what that did, and specifically what it did to his career, and that may have kind of like, I think, held him back greatly as well. And I definitely know that it's held back Keith Hernandez. I don't think Keith Hernandez gets in the Hall of Fame because of that. And he's a different story altogether. Unfortunately, I think too, is that you have a lot of very young writers who are voting on these players, and they're not voting for the players because of their off-field activity, and that's not right. If that were the case, from like say 1936 to say like 1990, you wouldn't really have any ball players in the Hall of Fame if you looked at their off-field activities as well. I mean, you have one player that was associated with the Dutch Schultz gang, and Ted Williams. He beat his wife, and they filed for divorce in 1958, and he had all these extramarital affairs off the field, and Joe DiMaggio wasn't the greatest. The Weiner brothers, those guys are drinking heavily, and then you have Ty Cobb, and you think Ty Cobb would be elected to the Hall of Fame today? I kind of doubt it, and so if you looked at these guys' off-field performances, you know, and included that into their record for Hall of Fame consideration, those guys would not be in. You're not voting on great human beings. You're voting on people who did amazing things on the field and for baseball. And today, that's been muddled considerably. And again, I'm not entirely sure if Lou Whitaker actually gets in the Hall of Fame. I think he should. I think that Don Mattingly should also get in the Hall of Fame. And it's funny, they mentioned too a few other ball players there. Jack Morris was not the guy. Well, he's been said to be a very kind of a nasty guy, not very nice. But you know what? That's all right. Uh, you know, it's what he did on the field that really counts, and his personality notwithstanding. Although some guys on the field, their on the field transactions have not been all that great either. Ted Williams, I believe he had some on the field transactions or transgressions, and I think he got fined in 1957 pretty heavily for his behavior. And Ted had a very bad attitude, even to his friends. And I've told you guys in the past, I am not a fan of Ted Williams. I respect his military service, but he is not a guy that I would ever want to have a beer with. Again, I liked his friends. Dom DiMaggio, very smart, truly smart guy, and not just about baseball, but almost every subject. And I would love to see Dom in the Hall of Fame too, if I could. So it's not just about your statistics that they look at here. And again, you guys can look at their statistics. I've thrown them up there too, and judge for yourself. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about either Alan Trammell or Lou Whitaker, or even Jack Morris, or the Detroit Tigers. Detroit Tigers have a great history, and I think they, I haven't followed baseball like I should currently because I'm so busy with other things. I'm pretty sure that they did win like one or two other World Series quite recently within the last 20 years. I want to say like 2005. I could be wrong, but you guys could tell me in the comment section below, and that'd be great. Because I do have a gap here for modern sports because I just don't watch it. I have to pay attention to other things, and I can't be a fan of sport. I take that back. I can be a fan of sports. I can't be a fan of specific teams because I'm a writer, and so I have to kind of remain unbiased. And that is super difficult for human beings to be unbiased. There's a bias in everything that we seem to do. Our likes, our dislikes, and sometimes that translates into sports or whatever the case may be. Do you guys also have a favorite card of either one of these guys? Because I would love to pick up a few more 1978 Topps Burger King cards, and I am going to go through that particular set in another video and tell you a little bit more about Burger King in 1978. I personally do not touch most fast food restaurants these days. I don't know if you can call it food, but I used to like McDonald's quite a bit, and I used to like their fries. I just don't touch it. I think Wendy's is probably the best, I think, for me, and it's maybe once or twice a year. And I can't even tell you the last time I went to Burger King. But do you guys, again, do you guys have any of these cards or have any specific favorite players from the Detroit Tigers? Their 1984 World Series was fantastic against the San Diego Padres, and particularly because when I was watching a lot of those World Series quite recently, I got to see a lot of the guys that I saw growing up and collected as a kid, and it brought back so many memories. And it's one of the reasons why I collect these I'm still gonna call them modern cards because for me they kind of are. A lot of people who weren't even born yet and collecting today, they would consider them vintage or not worth collecting because it's a junk wax era. And I don't take offense to that. I really don't. I don't think that I would collect modern cards today. Cards that have been printed in the last 10 years, because I don't know any of the players, and I haven't followed any real baseball for a long time. I follow history, and I try to tell you guys interesting stories about the players and the history of baseball and all this other stuff that's surrounding our sports cards. Obviously, uh, when I see this card right here, I'm not just seeing Alan Trammell or his autograph. What I am seeing with actually both of these cards are a very interesting time in the hobby, and not just that, but legally, um, a breakup of a monopoly that Topps had since 1956, and what that does to the collector and the hobby. Monopolies are obviously not that good. Some monopolies are actually allowed to stay because breaking them up would be more harmful. And sometimes, like in say um, Bell, like Bell Telephone, uh, that monopoly was allowed to stay for decades because they didn't know how to break it up, and that was like started in the 1950s. And when they said, "Okay, Ma Bell, you have a monopoly here," but then, okay, how do we break this up? They didn't know, so it took decades for that company to be broken up. And then with Microsoft, they did break up that company in what 19 no 2001. They broke it up, but it wasn't a full breakup. So it was just their licenses. And that actually gets me to another point here real quickly, is that Fanatics has a 20-year license with I believe baseball. I could be wrong about that, but they have several licenses. And I think what's going to happen is that the court system is going to look at those licenses, and they're going to break. They don't have to break up Fanatics specifically. If they find out that Fanatics is in fact a monopoly, they can just say, okay, like you're going to have to share your licenses with other companies, because if you don't, that is considered a monopoly, and that's the way that they might go. I don't know. I've never heard of a 20-year license, specifically through a sports league. I've never heard of it. And so that's going to be an interesting case to follow as well. But that's actually one of the reasons why I also collect these particular cards here, is because they are hobby history. And so, again, it's a little bit of that, and it's also a little bit of the artwork too, the design, because I'm a design freak, and it's also my childhood memories. And I think going forward, for a lot of collectors, they might come in and come out of the hobby, but they'll eventually go back because when they collected cards, they remembered what it was like. Those cards are memories for them too. Maybe very different memories than what I have. Uh, for me and my hobby memories, it was very simple. I think the hobby was a much simpler time in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. And then it gets quite complicated, say, after 1995, when you had other companies basically like they're really kind of started to be bought and sold by others, and it gets really kind of like a spider web, and it's very hard to see who owns what, where, and when. The hobby is a really fascinating place if you think about it, and we seem to be kind of going in circles, a dog chasing its tail, because a lot of the stuff that I saw growing up in the hobby regarding cards like this. These cards are no longer being actively traded, bought, or sold, so they are the prices are lowering where it's affordable, especially for my generation. Kids in the 1980s who couldn't afford cards like this now all of a sudden can, because we have more disposable income, and they're not actively being traded. The players are either passed on, like Ricky Henderson, rest in peace, Ricky. And that card has gone up a little bit more since his passing, and that's kind of to be expected. How long that lasts, I have no idea. I've already heard a lot of really interesting stories since about Ricky and his autograph. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it, as always. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any Lou Whitaker cards or Alan Trammell cards, if you saw these guys play, or if you think that Lou Whitaker should be in the Hall of Fame. Me, personally, I definitely think he should. But then again, I am biased because I did see him play back in the 1980s. Anyway, guys, thank you again. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you in another video. Have a good one. Bye.